Sometimes, the hardest part of a breakup isn't the goodbye. It isn't deleting the photos. It isn't returning their belongings. It isn't even the first night you fall asleep without them. The hardest part is the silence that comes afterward. Every morning, you check your phone, not because you expect a message, but because a small part of you still hopes there will be one. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. Birthdays pass. Holidays come and go. Life keeps moving. But one question refuses to leave your mind. If we were so close, why haven't they reached out even once? Did they stop caring? Did they move on that quickly? Did everything we shared mean less to them than it meant to me? These are some of the most painful questions someone can ask after a breakup, because silence leaves room for imagination. When someone doesn't explain their thoughts, our minds often try to explain them for us. Unfortunately, those explanations usually become much harsher than reality. We start believing things like, "They never loved me. They forgot about me. I was so easy to replace." But silence doesn't automatically mean any of those things. In fact, there are many reasons someone may never reach out after a breakup. Some are painful, some are understandable, and some have nothing to do with how much they cared about you. Today, we're going to explore those possibilities and hopefully help you stop letting someone else's silence define your worth. The first possibility is also one of the most difficult to accept. Sometimes, someone doesn't reach out because they genuinely believe ending the relationship was the right decision. That doesn't automatically mean they never loved you. It doesn't mean the relationship wasn't real. It doesn't even mean they never think about you anymore. It simply means that, from their perspective, going back would create more pain than peace. Think about it this way. Imagine someone makes one of the hardest decisions of their life. They spend weeks, or maybe months, thinking about it before finally ending the relationship. Whether that decision was right or wrong, they may feel that reaching out would only reopen emotions they've already worked hard to process. For them, silence isn't always about indifference. Sometimes it's about consistency. If they believe the relationship shouldn't continue, they may feel that contacting you would only blur the boundaries they worked so hard to create. This can be especially true if they know you still have feelings. The last thing they may want is to accidentally give you hope if they aren't prepared to rebuild the relationship. That doesn't make the silence easy, but it can make it understandable. One of the kindest actions can sometimes feel like one of the cruelest. Imagine reaching out to someone you know still loves you. You ask how they're doing. You have a nice conversation. Maybe you even laugh together. Then the conversation ends, and nothing changes. Now imagine being the person who sent that message. You know they probably interpreted your text as a sign that maybe, just maybe, there's another chance. But if you already know you don't want to restart the relationship, you've unintentionally given someone hope that can't grow into anything real. Some people avoid that situation entirely, not because they don't care, but because they do. They know how powerful one simple message can be. How have you been? Can become weeks of wondering. A casual conversation can become months of renewed hope. And if they aren't willing to continue walking toward reconciliation, they may decide it's kinder not to take that first step at all. From the outside, that silence feels cold, but inside their mind, it may feel like they're protecting both of you from another painful goodbye. One mistake people often make after a breakup is believing they're the only person hurting. The truth is, breakups affect both people. Not always equally, not always in the same ways. But very few meaningful relationships end without leaving some kind of emotional mark. People heal differently. Some talk to friends every day. Some throw themselves into work. Some travel. Some start new hobbies. Some avoid anything that reminds them of the relationship. And some believe the only way they can move forward is by avoiding contact completely. That doesn't automatically mean they stopped caring. Sometimes, distance is simply the strategy they've chosen to help themselves heal. Imagine trying to recover from an injury while repeatedly reopening the wound. That's how some people experience post-breakup communication. Every conversation pulls them backward emotionally, so they stay silent. Not because they never think about you, but because thinking about you already hurts enough. Again, That doesn't mean their approach is perfect, but it reminds us that silence isn't always motivated by a lack of love. Sometimes it's motivated by the desire to finally begin healing. Now here's a possibility that surprises a lot of people. Sometimes, both people are waiting. After a breakup, pride, fear, uncertainty, and confusion can exist on both sides. One person thinks, if they wanted me back, they'd text me. Meanwhile, the other person is thinking the exact same thing. Neither reaches out, not because neither cares, but because both are afraid of rejection. They're afraid of hearing, "I've moved on," or "I don't want to talk anymore." Or maybe they're worried they'll make the other person's healing harder. So instead, they stay silent. It's important not to build your hopes around this possibility, because we simply can't know whether it's true. But it does remind us of something important. Silence isn't always as simple as, "They never cared." Human emotions are rarely that black and white. Sometimes people stay quiet because they're protecting themselves. Sometimes they're protecting you. Sometimes they're protecting a decision they already made. And sometimes they're simply afraid. The challenge is that, from the outside, all of those reasons look exactly the same. Silence. And that's why it's so dangerous to assume we know what someone else's silence means. Because without hearing their thoughts, we're only guessing. The problem is, our guesses usually tell us more about our own fears than they do about the other person's reality. One of the biggest misconceptions people have after a breakup is believing that if someone misses you, they will automatically come back. It sounds logical. After all, if you miss someone enough, why wouldn't you text them? But human emotions are rarely that simple. Missing someone and deciding to rebuild a relationship are two completely different choices. Someone can miss the conversations you had. They can miss your laugh. They can miss the routines you shared. They can even wonder how you're doing, and still believe that getting back together isn't the right decision. That's one of the hardest truths to accept, because we often think emotions should automatically create action, but they don't. Think about people who move away from their hometown. They may miss it every day. They may miss old friends. They may miss familiar places. But that doesn't always mean they're going back. The same can happen after a breakup. Someone can miss parts of the relationship while still believing it ended for a reason. That doesn't erase what you shared. It simply means memories and decisions don't always point in the same direction. When weeks or months pass without hearing from someone, it's easy for your mind to reach one painful conclusion. If I really mattered, they would have reached out. But that conclusion assumes something that simply isn't true. It assumes that every person responds to loss in the same way. They don't. Some people fight for relationships. Some people withdraw. Some people become emotional. Others become quiet. Some people process grief privately and never let anyone see it. That's why silence isn't reliable evidence of someone's feelings. Silence only tells you one thing for certain. They haven't contacted you. It doesn't tell you exactly why. Our minds often rush to fill in the blanks. They forgot me. They're happier without me. They replaced me. But those are stories, not facts. Could they be true? Possibly. Could something entirely different be true? Absolutely. The difficult part is accepting that you may never know. And while that uncertainty is uncomfortable, creating painful answers where none exist usually hurts even more. The healthiest thing we can do is separate what we know from what we imagine. What we know is their behavior. What we imagine is everything else. For many people, life quietly becomes a waiting room after a breakup. They aren't really moving forward. They're waiting. Waiting for a text. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for closure. Waiting for proof that the relationship mattered. Days continue passing, but emotionally, they're standing in the exact same place. Every notification creates hope. Every unknown number creates curiosity. Every birthday, every holiday, every memory becomes another opportunity to wonder. Maybe today, the problem isn't hope itself. Hope can be beautiful. The problem is when hope becomes the reason you stop living your own life. Because every day spent waiting for someone else's decision is a day you're unable to fully make decisions for yourself. Healing doesn't begin the moment someone texts you. Healing begins the moment your happiness is no longer dependent on whether they do. That's a difficult transition, but it's also an incredibly freeing one.